In this video, we are going to pick up kind of where we left off in the last functions video. So if you haven't seen that, you will probably want to go back and watch it. But so far, we have just seen a void function, which simply does something. And it just does something all on its own. There's no dynamic input or anything like that. And so we're going to kind of, today in this video, we're going to talk about how to pass values into a function to use them. And now this might sound kind of scary, but I promise it's really not too scary. So let's go ahead and we're going to change this. And we're not going to have it called say hello because it's going to say something else. And we're going to have it say report number. And what we're going to do is we're going to give this function parameters. And what parameters are is they are values or basically variables that can be passed into a function and then used within that function. And so in this case, we'll just pass it an int and we'll call it number. And then we're just going to output number found and then number, just like that. And so now, once again, we need to update our prototype because we've changed the name. And so we'll copy and paste that up here. And we will paste it here as well for the call. And so as you can see, this actually has a number or a parameter, but up here neither of these do. And so we need to update our prototype to say that it is going to take an integer. And there are two different ways to do this, and they really are basically the exact same in terms of clarity. We can either put int and just leave it like that, or we can specify int number. It really doesn't matter. I generally just put int just because it's a little bit shorter and it really doesn't make that much of a difference. So what you're doing here is you're actually putting the data type. And so if, for example, I wanted this function to take multiple numbers and report multiple numbers, and we'll take a look at that kind of later, then I could put a comma and say double number 2. And then up here, I would simply need to put comma double, and now these would match. But like I mentioned, we'll go over that a little bit more in detail later. But so now we have to pass this an integer. And so let's go ahead and we will pass it, let's just pass it 5 for now. And so we've updated our prototype, we've updated our call, and we've updated our definition. And as you can see, I can actually just pass this a constant or literal, and it works just fine. And what ends up happening is when our flow gets, or when our program control hits this point, it will go into the function report number, it will look for the parameter, and it will see that 5 is the number that was passed in. And so this variable number will take on the value of 5. And so we'll say number found, and then it will output 5, and then it will output an end line. So we'll go ahead and hit Control F5 to see this run, and sure enough, number found, 5. Everything looks great. But now let's go ahead and change things. We will say number found, we'll just keep that, and then we'll say changing number to, and we'll change it to 6. And so let's go ahead and do number equals 6. And just for clarity, number now equals number. And then let's go ahead and just get rid of these. And now we're going to, I'm going to change things quite a bit here. We're going to put int num1, or we'll just say number, equals 5. And we'll pass in number. And then we'll see out number after the function happens. Now this is where something called scope comes into play. Or not so much scope, but scope's a good word for it. Is that we've created a variable here inside main called number. And it equals 5. And inside report number, excuse me, inside report number, we also have a variable which is an int number. Now it is just coincidence, or me naming them the same thing, or whatever, that these are named the same thing. These are not the same variable. So I'm going to say that one more time. these are not the same variable. What this means is that any changes down here in report number do not affect any changes inside main. This number and this number are completely separate variables, which just happen to be named the same thing. And so I could name this num1, and then change this to num1 and change this to num1. And then inside this function, we would still work with number, even though up here we passed in num1. This is called passing by value. And what we're doing is we're actually just passing in the value of num1, which is 5, and then assigning it to a variable, which in this case is called number. So I'm going to put these back to number just because I like that better than num1. And so now that we're clear that these are not the same variable, but they do have the same value, at least when this function first is called. Now let's go ahead and run it, and we're going to say back in main, number equals, just so I can prove to you that changing this to 6 will not affect this number. And sure enough, number found, which is this first line right here, 5. Changing number to 6, and number now equals 6. But now back in main, number equals 5. Once again, because these are different variables, even though they have the same name. And so as I mentioned, it's possible to pass multiple variables, or pass multiple values. So let's change this to report numbers, and it will take number 1 and int number 2. And we'll say, let's see here, let's just do number 1 equals, and we'll do number 1. And we'll do number 2 equals, and we'll do number 2. And then now we need to update our prototype by putting int, because now we have 2 integers that are being passed in. And so we'll say number 1, let's just let it equal 5 still, and we'll say number 2 equals 12, just because. So we'll do number 1 and number 2. And we can get rid of this line. Let's go ahead and run it. Alright, and so now we're back. Sorry about that quick delay. So as you can see, I made a very, very common error that is just kind of silly of me. The name of my function is report numbers, and in my prototype we have report number, because I forgot to update the prototype name, even though I updated the parameter list. So we'll add an S there, and add an S there. So now it matches report numbers, report numbers. Now we can run it. Everything's happy. 5 and 12. Press any key to continue. And so, real quick note, this is why it's very, very important to not just copy-paste code, as well as to make sure that you are actually updating everything that kind of you should be when you make changes to your code. Otherwise, you'll run into kind of embarrassing situations like this, and your code won't run. So now we should be pretty much pros at passing by value, or passing values into functions, adding parameters, at least into a void function.